tuning into Business Talks with the Rebel Entrepreneur. Let's cut the BS for a sec. No matter how successful you think you are, there's always more to learn about being in business. This podcast is about pushing through adversity, challenging the status quo, and learning what you don't know from kick-ass entrepreneurs who've been there, done that. Let's do this.
Welcome to another edition of Business Talks with the Rebel Entrepreneur. I am your host, Diana Noble, aka the Rebel Entrepreneur, and I am so excited today because I have this amazing guest, Marc Singer, also known as the Men's Coach. Marc and I actually met we were in a program together last year, and I was so taken over by his phenomenal story of perseverance through the most incredible challenge I can't even imagine being faced with. So in 2011, Marc was given a life sentence for a crime he didn't commit. And Marc, I'm going to let you elaborate on what happened from there. Like, what was going on for you back in 2011?
Yeah, quite a lot. It was actually, to be precise, the 11th of the 11th, 2011 at 11 a.m. So anyone who's into numerology can read into that a little bit. But I was given a prison sentence, a life sentence. In the UK, where I'm based, is called an IPP, which is indeterminate public protection, which means if you're convicted of a crime twice, you're given like 2 strikes and out. And so it wasn't that I was accused of killing anyone or anything. It was a fight at a work Christmas party that I was accused of taking part in. However, it's natural and normal for anyone hearing that to assume that I was a victim of injustice because I'd been convicted of something I hadn't done, which rightly so I was. I shouldn't have been convicted of that. But however, when you take a step back from it, I looked at it a bit different because I didn't see myself as a victim of injustice after a while, because I recognized that it was my past actually that caught up with me, because I had a bit of a reckless past. When I left school, got in a gang. I was involved in drugs, violence, stuff like that, and I went down the wrong path, and I moved away from that lifestyle. But essentially, it caught up with me, and it was my beliefs and attitudes that I developed at that young age, which I hadn't dealt with as I moved forward in life, that essentially led me to that situation and got me involved in that situation. So that was the start of a journey, which was to change my life forever, and in many, many ways. Yeah. So that was quite a dramatic turn of events.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. And of course, here in Canada, I'm not sure that we have the same sort of a process, but certainly your past can come back to haunt you if you are convicted of offenses in the future. The judge, of course, looks at that and says, well, wait a second, you haven't learned your lesson. I'm going to be a little bit harder on you this time.
Yeah.
So,
it was, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go.
I was just going to say, so you went to prison, and I'm just wondering, when they told you you're going to prison, what was going through your mind at that point in time?
Oh, good question. I was probably out. I don't know. I actually was probably numb at the moment. I mean, to be honest with you, I had all my family in court. I had my friends in court. There was tons of people there, and we went to court believing I'd be acquitted, obviously, because we knew we hadn't done it. My girlfriend was there giving evidence, but the evidence was completely rigged, basically, against me, in terms of there was no evidence against me, but the police painted this picture of me being some lunatic or whatever. And essentially, when the case was going against me, them, because I was going to win the case, they had a law in the UK where you can show the jury your previous. So if you'd committed a crime in the past which was similar, they could then turn around to the jury and say, well, look, he's done this in the past, which, to be fair, if you're sitting on a jury, any normal, rational person's going to think, look, he's done that before. Oh, he must have done it this time. So it was an understandable decision for them to come to the jury. However, it wasn't just in the fact that I hadn't actually done that one. I did in the past, but I didn't do that one. So I couldn't grumble too much about that in terms of the fact that I'd been in trouble in the past, but I had moved on, and I had, on the surface of it was, injustice. But obviously when I went to prison, I realized that after quite a short space of time that I had to do something about my attitudes and beliefs, because it was those that had got me into this situation to begin with. So for the first 2 years in that prison, I was given, just so everyone knows, they give you a tariff. It's a minimum time that you've got to serve, and that was 6 years for me. But at that time, no one in the country was getting out on IPPs, because the law was that in order to get out, you had to demonstrate that you were never going to reoffend again. It was impossible.
That's impossible. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's completely impossible. So nobody was getting out. And so everybody who had these sentences, these IPPs, and there was thousands of people, majority of them were not really a threat to society. Because I'll give an example. There's a guy in there who's done 22 years for a threatening phone call. So, and he can't get out. The reason he can't get out is because he struggles with depression. And and they won't let him out because of that reason, or it wouldn't let him out for that reason. Now, at that time, nobody was getting out. So when I was given that sentence, I was told there and then in the court that I was never going to be free again, ever.
Wow.
They told me that's that. They said, yes, you got the tariff, which is 6 years, but the reality is you're not getting out. The earliest, if it's even possible, would be after 20 years. So what does that do to your mindset? And so I was obviously not very happy. I was going crazy at my barrister, my lawyer, arguing with him about it, because I believed he'd let me down because I shouldn't have been found guilty, and I didn't think he did a good enough job. My mother, I was in the courts, in the cells by now. My mother was in this room upstairs screaming at my barrister, going crazy at him. And so it was a horrible situation. But and I'll be honest with you, I was taking cocodamol pills to numb the pain, because I was in that dock and it was such a horrible situation. I don't think anyone can understand what it's like to be in a dock, knowing that you could lose your life, your freedom. It's bad enough. I've been in trouble before in the past, but nothing to that extent. Where you can lose your whole life. And so it was like, you can't get your head around it. So you're sitting in there, and when they read out that you're guilty and that you're given an IPP, it doesn't really dawn on you at first. You're still numb to it a bit. And it didn't really, even when he said you're never getting out of prison, I never believed that. I never thought, oh right, I'm not getting out of prison. So I remember going to the actual prison, and lots of other guys who are serving similar sentences are saying the same thing. There's no point even thinking about release, because you're not getting out. And what they do in these sentences is that they make you do courses which are called offending behaviour courses. Now, the idea behind these is that it addresses risk factors that they identify. Now, in theory, every time you do a course, it should lower your risk. But the reality is what they tended to do is every time you do a course, it highlighted more factors that they think you should work on. So they just give you more courses. So I ended up doing like 30 odd courses in the end. So the point is, I mean, when they said that to you at the start, you're not forced to do the courses, but they tell you if you don't do them, you're not getting out ever. Right. And so obviously that's your carrot, isn't it? You've got to do the courses. But I decided at an early stage, I wanted to do these courses, not just to get out, because like I said, I wasn't thinking about getting out, but because I wanted to address what was going on with me in terms of my beliefs and attitudes, because I recognized that that's what got me in that situation. So I thought I'll throw myself into that. And I did. And I started working on me and started working on the attitudes and the beliefs behind and I discovered that quite quickly. It's like unraveling a ball of string. I realized that I developed a belief when I was about 12, when I was badly beaten up. I was racially bullied and beaten up and put in hospital at about 12 years old. And at that stage, I developed a set of beliefs that to stand, in order, if you get bullied or whatever, you have to stand up to these people using aggression and violence. And I developed that belief because it worked. And once it worked, you think, all right, I'll do that again if that happens. So you do. And I started getting into that sort of like belief. I thought, I can look after myself now. And then I got out of prison and I got myself in a football gang. And I loved it, and I was involved in it, and I decided at that stage, at that early age, that I wanted to be the main man, and I wanted to get involved, and I wanted a reputation and all of that. And I threw my life into that for years. That's what I was focused on. But coming back to the prison thing, when I was in there, I decided that, I was going to work on myself for, and if for no other reason, just to be better and happier in myself. And after about 2 years of being in there, I was feeling quite optimistic. I was feeling quite good about myself. But then everything changed.
Well, what do you mean? What changed?
Well, my mum, I had a very close family, extremely close family. It was like my mum, my dad, they're all very supportive of me throughout. We had 21 cats.
Wow.
That shocks a lot of people. Yeah, we love cats. It was. I remember I was in a prison in Kent, in England, and it was November time, and they had this new rule come out that you had to get they were stopping normal clothes coming in. So you had to get your clothes in by this date, otherwise you would not have any more, and you have to wear prison clothes. So I'm going crazy at my mum saying, look, I need this tracksuit. I want this Lacoste tracksuit. Can you get it for me? Blah, blah, blah. Driving her mad. And she's rushing around, bless her heart, to get me all my clothes. Unbeknownst to me, she's tired. She's really drained. And she visited me in prison and she looked grey. And she's put it down to stress. 2 weeks later, she collapsed. Well, at first she thought she had a hernia, a ruptured hernia, but it wasn't. It was cancer, and she got cancer, and she's gone within 2 weeks of that. So that obviously changed my life. That was Christmas 2011, and then after that another weird thing. My cat died the day before. Now, I don't know about people who believe in afterlives and things like this, but there's something weird. I mean, my cat was in perfect health. There was nothing wrong with my cat. She was absolutely perfect. So I remember I was in a cell and I was on 23-hour bang up at the time because they had no staff in the system. So they let me out.
That lockdown where you're like in a cell for 24 hours, they let you out for one?
Yeah. So literally for 6 months on end, I was on 23-hour lockdown.
Wow.
Only out to get your food and have a shower or use a phone. That's it. So obviously I'm dealing with all of this at the same bloody time as having being stuck in a cell, not being able to talk to anyone, nothing. And so I got out in the morning. My mum by now is in hospital. She's in a coma. So I've got out in the morning. We knew she was going to go, but, we just didn't know when. And so I phoned my father to find out. And he said, he was in tears. He was crying. And he said to me, Mark, Tipsy's died. And that's my cat. And I'm trying to hear through everyone's screaming and shouting in the prison and that. And I'm trying to hear. And I just went quiet. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say because I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to hear about my mum. So anyway, I just hung the phone up and went back to the cell. The next day at 10 o'clock in the morning, the same thing. I woke up in the morning, rushed to the phone to get there before anyone else, phoned, and it was my mum who'd gone. So I had a crazy experience, though, to be honest with you. I mean, which I haven't really actually shared with many people, but it sort of put me at a bit of ease. When you're in that situation and you're stuck in a cell and you've got no one to talk to and you're going through that situation, there's nothing you can really do. I mean, there's nothing. You feel so helpless. Yeah. I couldn't talk to my dad or anything like that. So I'm sitting there. My mum went on a Saturday, and on the Monday, I'm sitting in the cell, and we had these strip lights above, and I'm laying there just like in my own world, and this light starts flickering, and I didn't notice it at first. But my mum had always used to say to me as a kid, when someone goes, the light will always flicker. So I was looking, and after about 2 or 3 times, the light flickered again. So 2 or 3 hours, the light flickered again. And by now I'm noticing it. So I stood up and I looked at it and I said out loud, "Is that you?" And it flickered instantly, right? And I'd been in that cell like 6-7 months and it hadn't happened before. But before that, when it first happened, I thought it's going to be a maintenance issue or something like that. But because it happened, when something just told me, and I asked the bloody light. I said, "Is that you?" And it flickered again. And that sort of put me at ease a little. And then I sat down, and for about 2 hours, I just sat there watching it to see if it happened again. Because I thought if it happens again, it's just an issue, maintenance issue. In the morning, I'll phone up maintenance. and nothing happened. So after 2 hours, it went by again. And I got up, I'm getting ready to go to bed now, sleep. And I said to the light, "Is that if that's you? Do it one more time, and I'll believe it." And it instantly flickered. Right?
Wow.
Freaked me out, but I felt elated. Instantly, I felt amazing, like totally like at peace. And so that was just a weird experience. Anyway, I'm in Kent, right? So this is like miles from where I live. So they've moved me to this. I should go back actually, just to mention, just before we move on, that when I was there, I had the option of going to see my mum in hospital before she passed. And they said, you can either go to see her now, or you can go and see her for the funeral, or go to the funeral. I couldn't do both. So I had to make a choice within 5 minutes of whether to say goodbye to my mum or go to a bloody funeral. And that's the sort of situation I was put in. But fast forward 3 months, and they've moved me to a new prison now. And I'm to be closer to my father. My dad was in bad health. I mean, after my mum died, he went downhill quickly. And I was shocked when he came to visit me once. My friends brought him up, and he was skin and bones. And I was really shocked how quickly it deteriorated. Anyway, 3 months exactly to the day after my mum passed, I was on the phone to him, and he died of a cardiac arrest. He just dropped down dead, and that's it. While I was talking to him, and do you know what the last thing I ever said to him was? You won't believe it. He said to me, "Mark, I'm dying." He couldn't hardly speak. I said, "You can't die. Who's going to feed the cats?" What a thing to say. I love you or anything like that, but you can't die. Who's going to feed the cats? What a thing to say. I mean, that was the last thing I ever said to my dad.
I don't know whether to cry or to laugh about that.
You can only laugh. You can only laugh. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, this is what I felt. I thought, why did I say that?
But you didn't know. You didn't really know, obviously, right? And,
well, I sort of did, I mean, it was 11:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and then we had to bang up in 10 minutes or something. So I quickly phoned my friend, and I said, "Look, and she went to her answer phone. She was out. I said, you've got to get round to my dad's. I think he's died." All right. And I just hung up, and I didn't know. And about an hour and a half later, the door opened. They come in and let me know. And that was that. And so I knew, obviously, them. So, but by then I was sort of like in a weird. I was accepting it. I knew he died. I just knew when the phone went dead. I knew. So that was that. I had to arrange both funerals from prison.
Wow.
My mum's first, obviously, and then my father's after that, because my dad couldn't cope with the mum. So I had to do both of those from prison, which is no easy task.
No.
And then that was that. And then I had to sell the family home. Again, I'm an only son, so I had to get friends to help shift everything out of the house, clean it, because the cats had been in a terrible state of it with my mum and dad in bad health and so on. Get all the cats rehomed, the ones that were left, because a load of them died straight after my dad died as well. It was really strange. But I must say, and coming back to the thing with the flickering lights, the exact same thing happened 2 days after my dad died as well. And that's crazy. I was in the cell and the flickering lights thing happened again, but this time in a different cell, in a different prison.
What do you think they were trying to say to you?
God knows. I've always been open-minded, but I mean, I don't know one way or another. I've never been 100%. I'm very curious about it, but at the same time, I don't know for certain. But I know that happened. I've tried to explain it. And you've got to remember that I was in those cells for periods of times before and after, and I watched those bloody lights like a hawk, and not once did they ever flicker again.
You know what? I truly do believe in the afterlife. Funny story, kind of off topic, kind of on topic. I was just in Banff for the weekend. Banff is in southern province of where I am. Okay. And I was at it was called the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, and it was built in the 1800s. Wow. And there were all of these haunting stories, and I'm that kind of a person where I'm like, I'm going ghost hunting today, and
I'm like that. Yeah,
go and take
I love it all. I've always been obsessed with it. Yeah, it's sort of, my mum was like that. She was psychic as well. She was a bit like that, so she was always very open to it all. I said I'm a believer in reincarnation, so I'm very much a believer that they've gone on and moved on to the next stage, wherever that may be. You know, it was their way of saying goodbye, and you know, we're all right. You know, so I've not had any experiences since, so I'm assuming they've moved on. But it was what it was, and so. Anyway, so that was that. I mean, I had to sell the family home. That was no easy task either from prison. I had to deal with all the probate and everything. It was just a non-stop thing. Then I got ripped off by the probate solicitors, started stealing money off me as well. So I had a load of things like that to deal with. And then my grandfather died. So that was like the icing on the cake in terms of deaths. I mean, my grandfather was 97 though, so but he was like very close. I was very close to him all my life, and so he was a big influence on me. And to lose him as well was just like the last of my immediate family, basically. So basically, in 10 months, I lost 31. Was it? Yeah, 31 people, things, people, animals, and no, more than that, more than 31. It's 33. 33 people, animals, or things such as my family home, just in 10 months. So it was a bit of a change in direction in my life.
Well, a lot of people would have been in that situation, and that would have been it for them. They would have not been able to go on. And so, how were you? You know, being. It would be hard enough dealing with that, just being outside, you know, on your own, let alone add the extra layer of being in prison for
not knowing if you're ever getting out.
Yeah, and
that, you know,
so how were you able to take that situation and turn it into something? Well, what did you turn it into? I guess.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, basically, initially. I was on autopilot. Like I buried my emotions, right, at first, just to get through the day-to-day stuff, because I knew that I couldn't have a breakdown. I needed to be conscious and, you know, I had to get money in. I had no money. You know, I had to be, you know, compass mentis to deal with the funerals and everything else. So I couldn't have a breakdown or anything. So I had to be with it. So I kept it together, and I was working in there. I was still working, doing the job while I was doing in there, working in a warehouse. So I was just keeping going day on, day out. Now, it was a year later after that something happened that broke the camel's back, really. And I'd moved to what's called an open wing, where you've got more freedom. So you're not locked up as much. You're able to come and go. You've got a key. You know, it's a bit more open. And I'd phoned a friend to let her know that I'd moved over to this new wing, which is a great, you know, it's a progression. And she said, look, I've got some news. And I was like, oh God, what now? You know, I've got no one else to die.
I don't want any more news.
There was no one else I could die. I said, no one's left, you know. And so I was like, okay. She goes, no, your ex-girlfriend. My ex-girlfriend was the only person probably on the planet who I still had feelings of love for, even though I had no dreams or desires to get back with her. I still saw her as a friend, a companion, someone I could reach out to. She was secretly now in a relationship with my best friend. Now, they didn't know each other. Now, they'd never met, as far as I was aware. But what had happened is the friend had been visiting me over a period of time on his own and secretly finding out information about her so that he could go and pull her. Yeah.
Brutal.
And it all came out, and I didn't know this at the time, obviously, but it all came out later on through emails, which I've still got. If anyone wants me to prove it, but no, emails that it was sent to a friend, and through him, where he was sort of basically worming his way in on the back. But anyway, so what happened was I just had a breakdown, a massive breakdown, and I went and took an overdose, right? I was just like, no, I wasn't really trying to kill myself. I just don't know what I was doing. I just lost it. And I just completely flipped out, and I nearly died. And I think I had a mini sort of heart attack, but it wasn't a major heart attack. It was like, because I collapsed and I stopped breathing for a moment and all of that. And then a guy found me and gave me CPR, a friend. Now, had I been on the other wing where I was locked up, I'd probably have died had I done that. Right. But luckily, because he opened the door to see if I was, and I was there, and he saw me and managed to save me. it was that was the turning point for me, because I decided then I didn't want to be a victim of my circumstances any longer. I don't see myself as a victim of being, like, you know, injustice, and I didn't want to see myself as a victim of that either. So I thought, this is my opportunity now to just take control, take responsibility. So it was a slow process. I was in a bad place physically, mentally, and emotionally. But I started building back slowly, starting off going to the gym and things like that. And I started doing a degree. I was working in the educational department, teaching critical reasoning skills to kids. I was also doing teaching kids, mentoring young kids in there. So I was bit by bit doing all of that, working in the right direction. And slowly but surely, I started feeling much more confident, much more optimistic. But what had happened is I stopped focusing on getting out. I stopped thinking about getting out. Now, what I do now is I do a keynote talk called Life in a Container, which is basically about stopping focusing on your container,
right,
and focusing more on what you can do within your container. And that's pretty much what I did. I was focusing on what I could do to be the best version of myself at that moment, and stop worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow or in 10 years or whenever. You know, I just focused today. What can I do today to be the best version of myself? That's all I did. And I started really loving it. Everyone loved me in there. I got on with all the prisoners, got on all with all the staff. And after 3 years, I eventually got out. It, to my shock, because I didn't expect it at all. No one expected. I was actually looking to progress to a lower category prison, which is called DK in the UK. But they actually said, look, my solicitors said, look, Mark, you're going to get out of here. Because they were so blown away by what I'd done. And their release test, what happened is, even though they'd had that release test where that you had to prove that you would never, a year before I went to parole, they'd changed it. A new minister had come in and changed the rules to make it easier for people to progress. So I got lucky. So that it fell at the right time. So when I went in front of the parole board, they looked at my case and what I'd been through and everything. And they said, look, there's not a thing in the world you're not going to be able to cope with out there. And that's true. I mean, so they let me out, and that was the start of a whole new journey. but yeah, getting out 2017, I got out, and that was like, yeah, it was a bit of a change as well, because everything had gone.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, a lot of times people, they will reoffend because they get out and they have nothing to go back to, right? They have to go back to that life of crime sometimes just to survive. And so for you would have been getting out without your cats, without your mom, without your dad, without your grandfather. You had no immediate family. So how did you do that? I was lucky.
I was very lucky, more lucky than a lot of people, because I still had some money in the bank because I'd sold the family home. Had I not had that money, I'd probably be in a worse off situation. But I was able to at least give myself a buffer to get my head right. So but the first year was an awful time. I was in a terrible place. I was lost. Didn't know which direction I was going in my life. I'd gone from being in prison where I had a big social life. Everyone loved me. Everyone got on with it. I was in a good frame of mind. People would be shocked at hearing that. It was great in prison. It was not so great outside, but it was. And so I come out and I had to start. I knew I couldn't work because my head was gone. I had to sort through all the baggage that I was going through, the emotional stuff that I'd buried. Mm-hmm. So I started I had therapy, I had counseling, and none of them worked for me. So I found coaching, and coaching was what got me out of myself. And that started helping me unpack the baggage that I'd built up or over that time, the emotional stuff, because like I said, I'd buried the emotions to get through it. So I had to unpack all those emotions. There was too much. I was completely cold inside at that stage. So yeah, I started. It was about a year later, after being out of prison, I found IPEC, as you well know, and that was what changed my life, IPEC, because I had no clue who IPEC were. My coach, I was having coaching. I realised, actually, I got backpedal here. When I was in prison, I did a business course. And they asked me, what would you do to do a business plan? What would you do if, your ideal career? I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I just said, I don't know, life coach. It was a joke. It wasn't serious. It was the first thing that came
out to the universe, though. And
yeah. But I didn't even know what a life coach was. And so, but the guy there, he went off and done the research, and he come back with all the stuff about a life coach. And turned out all the attributes and skills of a great life coach I had. So I thought, okay, there might be something in this, and I forgot about it. And then that was 3 years. And 3 years passed, and it was at the back of my mind somewhere. Got out and found coaching. And so, but now I've found coaching. I thought, okay, let's have a look at this. So I did a little bit of research and went on the ICF website, started digging around. So I thought, and I was going to do one of these cheap diplomas you see online, £1,500 or whatever it is. And then my coach said, look, Mark, if you're serious about it, do it properly. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay. So she goes, and I went off, I'm going to find the best school I could find in the world. And I did, as you well know.
For those of you listening, IPEC is the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching that both Mark and I are graduates from, although he is a graduate from the UK and I'm a graduate here in Canada. And the ICF is the International Coach Federation. So IPEC has a, how would you call that? An accredited program through the ICF.
Yeah. So they have a list on the ICF website of all the accredited programs around, and I think there's only about 30 of them. There's not loads, because to be accredited, you've got to go through a lot of hoops. Mm-hmm. They don't just give it to anybody. But I checked just before Christmas, and IPEC are still number one in the world as a coaching school. So they're very highly regarded, as you well know. Mm-hmm. And so I had no clue what was involved about coaching or whatever. I had no clue about setting up a business or anything like that. I just knew I had to do this. So I went for it, and it changed everything, didn't it? Because learning that philosophy that they teach us was my key to getting better mentally, emotionally, in every other area of my life. And I knew that it was going to take a little while to start living it and breathing it. But once I learned it, there's no unlearning it. And this is what I do now. I live and breathe that philosophy and also teach it. So this is what started me on the journey of where I am now, what I'm doing with my career now. Yeah.
And so now you're specifically working with men can you tell me a little bit more about the men who you work with?
Well, yeah, funny enough, most of my clients are actually women. But believe it or not, no. But the reason why I've recently rebranded as a men's coach, I do work with a lot of men as well. But because I've noticed there's been a bit of a shift in, there's a lot of men out there who don't feel that they've got someone to go to. Mm-hmm. And men's suicides and men's mental health issues is quite high, especially here in the UK. And, industries like the construction industry, for instance, have the highest suicide rate, unbelievably, out of all the industries. So men's mental well-being is quite high, but you don't see a lot of guys going out and reaching out to coaches and so on. It's predominantly a women's sort of thing. And so there are men coaches out there, but what I've discovered as I've gone through, and this is sort of by chance really, because of my story and because of my background, I was attracting certain types of guys to me. And the story I was getting from so many different blokes and guys was, I wouldn't want to go to a normal, I don't want to be treated like a woman. I don't want to be treated effeminately and told it's okay to cry and all of that sort of stuff. I don't want someone who's a softy sort of guy. I want someone who's been there, seen it, done it, who's not going to judge me for taking drugs and having fights.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the sort of guys I was. Man. Yeah, exactly. A masculine sort of man guy. And again, it's moving away from that whole image of I can't even say it, toxic masculinity, and identifying that it's actually okay to be a man. You don't. It doesn't mean that you're toxic if you're competent or you're reliable and all of that sort of stuff. So a lot of guys don't know where they stand in society because of certain ways of people labeling things or whatever. Well, and I've found
even too, right, is just like you grow up like men don't cry, men don't do this. You've got to put in your time, support your family. And there's so much pressures that a man has that are so different than what a woman has. Like, you hear a lot about women's pressures in society, but men have their own weight to carry as well. That is completely separate and apart from what women deal with.
Totally. And there's a belief out there. I think a lot of people think that men don't deal with their emotions. They do, but they just deal with them differently to women. So it's a different way of doing it. And I think sometimes a lot of coaches out there, not all obviously, but can approach men from a female perspective, and that doesn't always work. So not to say that, if I'm working with a woman, for instance, I'm not approaching her from a male perspective. I'm universal. So it's just me as who I am as a person. But a lot of guys will identify with me more because of my past and my history and so on. So that's really what it is. So there's no difference in the way I coach a man or a woman. It's exactly the same. But it's just because of who I am, a lot of guys will feel more attracted to working with me than they would if it was someone. And again, it's a limiting belief a lot of these people have. Right. A university sort of educated guy's not going to understand me. It's a limiting belief, but that's what a lot of people, guys will think.
But I would suggest that absolutely your past, your unique circumstances really do give you a different perspective than say somebody who's always had it easy, or somebody who went to university and then got a degree and then had a wife and children and so on and so forth. Like it's a different perspective. And so you definitely bring that to a client who they can relate to you because you've been through the same things and look at what you're doing now, right?
There's no fluffiness with me. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, there's no, I get rid of all of that. I say it as it is directly. And, so yeah, I mean, that attracts both men and women, I'll be honest with you. But I mean, it's just a different approach to what you'd expect from, say, a life coach. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what men do and what coaches do, I should say.
Oh, so yeah, so many.
Yeah, a lot of us think we're counselors or therapists and things like that. I've had people say I haven't got any problems, but if I know anyone who'll I'll send them to you, and I'm like, right, okay, you haven't got any problems. I mean, we've all got problems. I mean, I haven't met anyone who hasn't. So unless you're living your life at the best possible level consistently every single day, then
hold on a second. The people who are living their life the best possible consistently every single day, they also have coaches.
Exactly, and that's why they're doing it. And I made a point of this recently, like the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates and all of these people. That they're where they are because they've got coaches, not because they haven't. And so people misunderstand that. They think, it's only people who are struggling who have a coach. It's a nonsense. No, it's actually the winners in life who have coaches.
That's right. I love
the people who want to be successful. So yeah. So I mean, and so many people, doesn't matter what end of the spectrum you are, will talk themselves out of it because they think it's weak to have someone help you or ask for help or something like that. It's actually the opposite. I did a show the other week saying, there's a lot of guys out there. I call them the plastic tough guys. Because they go around, they take drugs, they're drinking, and they're telling everyone, I don't need any help. I'll just get on with it. I'm tough. To me, that makes you weak because it's the opposite. I mean, a real tough guy is the guy who looks within himself at the demons, his own demons, and fronts them and deals with it and moves
is
forward.
Not too afraid to reach out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And they're the real tough guys in my eyes. And so, because once you've confronted your own inner demons and dealt with all of that stuff, then there's nothing in the world that can stop you being who you want to be and achieving what you want to achieve.
100%. So, Mark, you're working on a book right now, which talks about your whole entire experience. Of course, today we just got a little snippet of that, but it's called To Hell and Back and Then Some. So where are you in your progress on getting your book?
I must have rewritten this book about 4 times, but I mean, no, because when I started it, it started it's very cathartic, but you're starting going through all the stuff in your life, which probably would buried many years ago. And so, yeah, I've gone backwards and forwards with it but I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through it now. And I'm hoping, please God, to get it out by the summer. This is what I'm aiming for anyway. So I just got to pull my finger out and get the thing finished, but I want it to be right. And I started it off, it just being in my story, so to speak. But really, I want it to be about everybody because everybody's going through something in their lives. Doesn't matter. My story is very dramatic, but everybody's going through some sort of change or trauma or difficulty in their life. And all my story really shows, just like like I said to you earlier about keynote speaking, I work in prisons, businesses, and like universities. I've done talks, so stuff like that. It's the whole premise is that it doesn't matter what you're going through or where you are in life. If you switch your perspective to see it from a different angle, you're able to move forward despite that and learn from it and grow from it and make it and use it to your benefit. And that's all I've done with my situation. You know, I've seen it as an opportunity instead of the problem. Well, you can't bring back your parents and things like that, but what you can do is learn from it and use it to move you forward with your life, which is what I've done. And that's what I want the book to be about. I want it to be everybody to look into that book and see themselves in it.
Well, I'm expecting a signed copy of that book, Marc.
You'll get plenty.
Give me my address. I want to have that signed copy, and I really look forward to reading that. For those who are listening, if they want to hire you, if they're a man's man who needs a little bit of help and they're not too afraid to reach out and get it, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, yeah, you can contact me directly. I do a live show every week on Facebook as well, which is also on my YouTube channel. So I'll plug that. But yeah, LinkedIn, YouTube, directly, emails, website, whichever way you want to choose. But I can give you some links, and you can clock me that way. But there's plenty of ways you can get hold of me. Follow me on Facebook. That's probably the best way.
All right. Thank you so much, Marc, for being here today. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I really appreciate that. And you know what? You're doing amazing things, my friend. And I know that you are going to be helping so many people, so many men who have found themselves in maybe not the same situation as you, but maybe a similar situation of being at their lowest low and wanting to grow from there. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into Business Talks with the Rebel Entrepreneur with your host, Diana Noble. If you like this episode and want more business tips from the Rebel herself, give @Noble Choice Coaching a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Have a topic you want covered on a future episode? Reach out and let's do it. Now, go kick some ass.